right, thanks everyone for joining the Austin Retail and E-Comm meetup. We're going to be talking about customer personas today. So if you have them, if you're not sure if you have them, if you're not sure why you should have them, we're going to talk all things personas. I have some slides prepped, but it's really just to facilitate the conversation. My name's AJ Davis. I'm the co-meetup person with Lori, who is at the Big Commerce event this week. And so we'll be recording our time today. We get lots of watches after, so you're welcome to rewatch it if you miss any details. And I invite you to raise your hand, unmute yourself if you want to ask a question as I go, or just pop something in the chat and keep an eye on that as well. Anyone have any questions before we get started on personas? Get my screen shared. All right, let's get rolling. So I will be talking about how to maximize the value of e-commerce customer personas today, but we'll talk about what that is exactly and then how you should build them and use them. So our topics will be what are customer personas, how to maximize those values, and then how to level up the quality of those personas so that you're acting on meaningful data for building your company. And then throughout, but also at the end, we'll do some Q&A and discussion. So if you have personas and you want to talk about what you know, what you're not sure about, how to get them, we can get grounded in some examples today. I'm AJ Davis. I'm the founder of a company here in Austin called Experiment Zone, and I help brands improve conversion rates by improving their customer experiences. So personas fit right into this. You got to know your customer in order to design the right experience for them. And there's some ways to get in touch with me. So you are welcome to shoot me an email with any questions or thoughts you have about the talk today. Find me on LinkedIn. And I love in-person or virtual coffees. So feel free to just grab some time on my Calendly. Would love to chat about your business and what you're up to. All right, so let's start by saying, what are customer personas? And I like to start first saying like what they're not, because oftentimes we get start combining ideas of what we mean by personas. So when we think about marketing, brands will often look at their data and they'll do market segmentation to help understand and target an audience. Is not what we're talking about. So when we look at just demographics or just gender, your different socioeconomic statuses, like all these sort of facts or attributes of a customer, that can be part of your persona, but that's not why we have one. And that's not where we start. So what a persona is that it helps bring to life your target customer. It helps you picture a real person that you would be talking to if you were selling in real life in person. Welcome to everyone just jumping in now. If you just to kind of catch everyone new up, we are going to be talking about customer personas today, and I'm AJ Davis, and you're welcome to be adding any questions or comments you have in the chat today as we go. All right, so I came across this and I thought that this was just such a perfect representation of when we get brought in, we often see sort of a combination of some of these different persona types. So a composite is like, I'm on, an average American has 2.4 kids, so that's what I am as a persona. Or, something that's very stereotypical, something that says, I am my target customer. And so I'll describe myself as the marketer, as the persona. Sometimes it gets a little bit philosophical. It sometimes is set in stone and we're not evolving as our customers change and their needs change. I think most importantly, and maybe most commonly, is the useless trivia one. We see a lot of this. You see a lot of information that has nothing to do with picturing that person and what their needs are and how it relates to your business. So this is one where maybe we've gone a little overboard painting a very narrow picture of our customer instead of what matters and how we communicate with them. And then lastly, it's really common to create a persona and leave it and just kind of send it out and share it, but not act on it. So we're going to talk about that today and how to make sure that isn't the case for your team. So a definition for us today is we're going to talk about a semi-fictional character. So this is based and grounded in some truth and some maybe aggregation of real truth about your customers. And it's focused on either your current or your ideal customer. We want our personas not to represent a single person, but rather a group of users or a group of needs and wants. And we want to have some fictional personal details in combination with context specific details. So if you're selling like Kirby things for pets, your persona should have something to do with pets. It's probably a pet owner or somebody whose like family loves their pets and would be gifting pets. So if we're just talking about, oh, on the weekend they watch football, that probably doesn't intersect very directly with their pet needs. Allison, thank you for putting your name in here. I love that you've gone ahead and done that. So everyone feel free to jump in with any information about what you're up to, your website links, to kind of help that conversation go in addition to this. Personas can be displayed in lots of different formats. Oftentimes it is this visual narrative. In different parts of my career, I've actually had these visual personas printed out and put on my wall or put in our cafeteria so that the team could like stop and think about it, or it's kind of present in our conference rooms as we're working. So it can be helpful to have some sort of illustration, whether you represent it as like an image of a real person or some sort of illustration. Those little details don't matter as much as what it is that you capture about your target customer or this persona. So customer personas can do a couple things for us. They can help us take a moment to empathize with the person on the other side of the screen. So what is that prospective customer's needs? What do they want out of life or out of your product? It helps us understand what motivates them to make a purchase. Why would they purchase today or in a month from now? Why is it like, why would they be browsing, or what kind of piqued their interest in what you do? And then very importantly, this, as we know more about our personas and define this better, we can start to communicate better with them, either in the way that they communicate or in the kinds of content that would be useful to them. So you want to be able to create content that attracts the right customers, that target group. So you have to define the group in order to start putting together that content. Any questions about what personas are or what they look like? Who has personas right now, and how many do you have? If anyone wants to unmute and let us know, that'd be great.
I don't have any. I know it's someone that spends more on their pet than I would spend on my own. That's about it.
Mm-hmm. How about everybody else? Who's used a persona before? Either maybe not for their current business, but who's used one before?
We have personas, and because we have a marketplace for educational resources in all languages, we have personas for every language, like a parent who is wanting to teach their kids Spanish. So we break it down into kind of even smaller than one general.
Mm-hmm. How many languages do you support?
We can support all 7,000 world languages and dialects. Right now we have 82 languages we launched last year.
And do you have 82 personas then, or do you like focus in on a subset?
We're starting, we're doing our rollout language by language. So we started with Spanish, English, Mandarin, and Arabic. And we broke it down into what their motivation is for learning a language. Is it to learn their religion? Is it to pass on a heritage language to their child? Is it for future success, like English and Mandarin? That's why people learn that. So we break it into their motivation and culture. And yeah, and don't have 82 yet, but ideally we're rolling through that to speak directly to that target audience.
Mm-hmm. And I love about what you're describing is that it's grounded in how it connects directly to your product. So there might be a whole bunch of other things that could be true about someone who wants their kids to learn Spanish, but it sounds like you're grounding it in that desire and that kind of long-term view of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's really important. We hadn't thought about this when we started our marketing campaign, and someone said, "Who's your ideal customer profile? Have you done that yet?" And it's it was eye-opening. So this is important.
Yeah, and we haven't really covered this yet, but the idea that once you write it down, you start to see the assumptions you have that might be different than your team. So it's a really great way to just have alignment on who it is they're talking to and what they care about. Who has never seen a persona before? Today's conversation. A couple yeses. Great. Do you guys have any questions about what we've covered so far? First timers about what what these are about?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. These are noise canceling headphones, so I like kind of can't hear myself. So it's kind of sounds weird. But I think so the point of a persona is to build like one like target person, like you build the profile of a person, and that helps you with developing like marketing and products and to, okay, so
And it
so
doesn't
you're
have
build-
to be,
yeah.
it doesn't have to be just one. So it can be a persona or
Okay.
multiple personas.
Okay.
So for example, we work with a client that sells things for new moms. And so they have personas that are the mom themselves, maybe their partner, maybe they're like their friends that are going to gift for them. So you may have multiple groups of people represented in a couple of personas. Just like Allison was saying, they have one per language.
Right. Okay. Okay. It's making more sense. Thanks.
Great. All right. Thanks for jumping in with the questions. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going with how to maximize the value once you do have those personas, how to get the most from them. So this feels like a pretty common sentiment, you know, okay, great. We hired someone to build personas. They were these pretty graphical picture things that we sent around to everyone. What do we do with them? How does it impact what I do in my day-to-day? Very often it's like an exercise teams feel like they need to go through and they're not putting it into action. So my goal for you today is to find at least one thing in this conversation that's going to change how you're thinking about your personas and putting them into action. So I think an important thing from a marketing perspective is once you know who your target audience is, either persona or personas, you can start to understand where they'll spend their time. And it may be like their physical time in physical locations, or maybe more relevant to digital marketing is where they spend their time online, what kinds of sites or experiences that they do primarily. So if you're a B2B company versus a B2C company, you might have different answers about, are they going to be looking for something that will solve their problem that I can help with? Is it on Facebook? Is it on LinkedIn? What's sort of the context where they're thinking about this problem or more open to starting to explore it? Do they read different types of news articles, or do they get information at different places in the site or on the web? And I think most importantly, it's about prioritization. So it's very common to want to do every single type of platform and put yourself everywhere. But if your customers are only in certain places, that's kind of wasted effort and wasted spend. So it's a good way for you to prioritize, get started somewhere, validate that that's in fact where they're ready to respond. All right, I did just get a question. So Allison asked, we're struggling with conversion on our site and looking for some information about audits and optimization. So that definitely connects directly to what we're talking to. And well, I can provide some talking points around that. It is something my company Experiment Zone does specifically. But as it intersects with this, whenever you're doing an audit, whether you're doing it yourself or as your company is hiring someone, a good way to know if they're a good company to work with is if they don't ask you in the process who your persona is, who your target customer is, then they're just auditing your experience based on a checklist that isn't catered to that particular user group. So there are some best practices to sites that we want to make sure, error handling, people can undo what they're trying to accomplish. But when you look at your site, very importantly, you want to know, are we thinking with that customer's hat in mind? So I think I have a slide just after this couple from here, but we'll get into that. Thanks for your question. So another opportunity offsite is to think about partnerships. And this is one where some companies do this really, really well, and other companies just kind of forget about this. So if your customer already has relationships and trusts other types of companies, they're already shopping a certain way, or they go to that person as a source of information. If you work with these companies or influencers in a really targeted way, and you could even start with the persona and say, where do they spend their time? Who do they trust? So that you can identify what partnerships will make sense for your brand. So this can help you. Again, it's all about budget and time. So personas are going to save you time if you focus on them. So you're not spending money and time just chasing on every possible person who could be your customer. And then the flip side of this is if you think about who would be a negative brand association for the persona, what are things that they dislike that if you associate with that brand would have a negative connotation for your brand and for your audience. So you want to think about both of those angles. Who do they trust? Who do they not trust? So that you can focus where you partner. And then, most importantly, building that trust and credibility. You're joining in that community. You're, being connected to sources that already have credibility with them. So it levels you up more quickly by saying, we already have this partnership. You know them, you trust them, you'll trust us too. Anybody have any questions? I'll keep an eye out for chat, but feel free to unmute as I go.
Hey, AJ, I had one. So by trade, I'm in product management and I play nicely with marketing. For whatever reason, most product managers just, I don't know, kind of don't. My question of sorts is, with user personas, I've seen it, within product management. Obviously, we're talking about a kind of marketing sort of perspective. Do those tend to be the same user personas, or are those slightly different that we could kind of, basically that we could use the same user personas, or would they be different is the root of the question?
Yeah, I love this question. My background, I come from the product development space and have moved into marketing. So it's definitely a question that's in my mind, like how much overlap is there with this data set and with how you develop the personas? I think there's a different lens that you would take, but the customer themselves would be similar. So Kirby, do you mind if I keep using you as our example today?
Go for it.
Okay, great. So, for Kirby's company, he might be building buyer personas or customer personas that are more around, I want to think about somebody who's going to gift the product and who's giving to someone who has a dog, or I have a dog, I need a dog too, and I haven't decided which one yet. So those may be states of those life cycles where it may not be as relevant to the product development cycle. But for the product team, they're going to say, are people happy with the dog chew when they get it? What's the experience like after that? Who is happy and keeps repeating? And so, Paul, to your question, there's the repeat customer or the new customer, I just bought it, these different moments of the persona life cycle where both groups should care, both marketing and product should care, and there should be a connection between the two. So to simplify that, you can imagine there's like 2 or 3 personas that are prioritized and well-defined as I'm in a buying mindset for the marketing team. And then you can have versions of that, what happens after they have the product or as they're using the product, that go hand in hand for the product development team.
And if you're going to cover this, I'd just be interested to understand about how are you prioritizing those buyer personas that eventually, in my mind, right, go into customer personas for product? Are those being prioritized based on, revenue or usage, or I'm sure there's different, measurements and what have you, short of just, throwing a dartboard. But yeah, no, I appreciate the explanation, and I agree that kind of separation between buyer and customer, and there's overlap, but they still play nicely with each other. So.
Yeah, and the more integrated the teams are, it may be useful to use similar naming conventions for them, right? Because it's like the pre-purchase person of AJ is the same person a couple months later that the product team might be more focused on my needs and wants. But you could, then that way you can kind of tie it together and say, we're thinking about this part of the life cycle versus this part for that same person.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense.
And we do have some conversation about prioritization lined up, but if we don't get into the detail enough for you, let me know and we can do some follow-up discussion on it. All right, great. This came up a little bit already in one of our questions that came up. So personas are super helpful for evaluating your site experience. If you just look at your website and you say, is it doing what I need it to do? You're probably going to be looking at it from your own perspective. You're going to be talking about, my business does this. We sell dog chews, Kirby. But the persona might have a different way of thinking about it and something that might be more interesting or a different way to word it. They might wonder how you measure up to your competitors, or they may have doubts in their mind because they've had other products that really suffered and didn't live up to it. And so they have like a need to fill the gap in the space between this didn't work last time. Why are you guys going to be different? So the more you understand your persona, the more you can speak to them and think about how they're going to experience your store, what questions they may have. Are they somebody who's like if they're a business user, so it's B2B, and they're looking to evaluate different solutions for their company, they might be at a desktop and they may have more time to open up tabs and explore and compare versus, a busy new mom on her cell phone who's like, I have 5 seconds to figure this out. So as soon as you start to understand the person and their context, you can start to understand how much information and where that information should live. So I like to actually think about putting on the hat of that person, building out a scenario description for myself of what is it that I should be caring about as this persona as I look at the site? What are the goals I have even before looking at the site? And what questions do I need to have answered? And then you can go evaluate your site to make sure you're measuring up to what that persona needs. Helps you prioritize what matters to them, what order they need to see things. And then you can also start to identify like where the gaps are. So if I have these core goals as a customer or as a prospect, and they're hard to find, hard to achieve, hard to figure out, your return policy or what have you, by defining it based in the persona, you'll have a more accurate read on what you should be doing now. Related to the site and email and social and any place you're writing copy, as soon as you start to write down your persona, you're going to be writing to that person as opposed to the world. So the type of copy you write can be much more specific. It can be in their language and it can be about the things they care about. So you can start to mirror what other sort of sources they like to consume. Do they like long form? Do they like video? Do they communicate a lot in images, maybe even like emoticons or something else? So you can start to understand who is this person and how can I connect with them at their level. I like to do an exercise actually where I picture the persona like sitting across from me at a coffee. So it's like, how would I introduce my business and what I would do to that persona? What would that conversation look like? What kinds of questions might they ask me? So that I can write the copy to that person as if I was writing them a letter or having a conversation. Has anyone ever done that before? When you write your copy, you're picturing a specific person in mind or a persona? Or how do other people do this? Nobody writes any copy.
Products, not writing the copy, but
Yeah,
yes.
fair. All right. Martha said, target to the audience on all communications. That's absolutely right. So then another thing that could be really useful is to ground your team in the audience to your real customer. So oftentimes when we get into these modes of brainstorming, which should our new products be? Should we have a new landing page? Like all these kinds of like gadgets and widgets and fun things that are really exciting to talk about. We can end up in this place of just brainstorming lots and lots of things that seem fun and sparkly or interesting. But if we aren't grounding them in the persona with their given needs and their given objectives, then we're going to have a big gap between what we prioritize as a team because we all thought it was interesting and exciting and what our customers truly need. So I like to start brainstorm sessions by reminding everyone, which persona are we focused on in this conversation, reviewing some of the information about that persona, their needs, their wants. It's a good place to like bring a little bit more life to it, to ask questions, to talk a little bit about the assumptions that goes into that person before you start brainstorming. So instead of asking, what should we offer today? We ask, what does this persona, new mom need that we don't currently offer today? What do they struggle to understand about our brand and products? And these questions will help get us to a place where we can start talking about what we should do, what solutions we should put out there to address the persona needs. Next step is leveling up personas. So before we get there, does anyone have any questions about how personas can fit in the workplace? Does anybody use personas in their day-to-day, or how often do you feel like this comes up in conversation? Martha, did you have you want to talk about how you guys are doing it?
We use personas to target the users of our systems.
Mhm.
So, Sammy support, Danny DevOps, sales associates, store managers, where we're making sure that we're meeting their needs, meeting their requirements, and using the language that they would expect to see in our solutions. So yeah, all the time. And it becomes part of the vernacular, right? You're talking with, developers, engineers, testers. There's oftentimes weighing against, what would this person like? If a persona is Beverly Buyer, is this a feature that Beverly Buyer would be happy with, or is there something else that we need to target her way to make this a feature that she would enjoy? So, kind of the software solution perspective.
Chris, I saw you pop off mute. Did you want
Yeah,
to share?
I can add a little bit. We have a brand I just launched related to pickleball, products like gloves and arm sleeves and socks and that kind of thing. And so and I've done a lot of B2B software in the past, so we used a lot of personas in that, and even just designing the software. But for pickleball, I've sort of taken it a little bit different, which I think has been helpful, is also to drive some of the misconceptions. Like, for example, like there's professional pickleball, and so a lot of the brands in pickleball are investing heavily in that. But you look at like that following, like, okay, how many people log on to a view, or how many people are following the top players in the world on social media, and it's like very few. And so like sort of just because it's flashy or kind of looks cool, I don't know, I sort of pull back on the data and say, well, where are they actually engaging? So then you can look at like, okay, well, in this Facebook group in a suburb outside of Houston, there's 2,200 members of this group. It's like more members of that little group in that little area than are following the top 5 player, in the world. So basically reassessing using data to sort of, create the personas, or sort of rank them and say this persona is more interesting and worth more time and investment.
Yeah, I love that connection to Facebook groups. I find more and more people are starting to be able to find such a specific niche in a place like a Facebook group, or some of the different social platforms. You can just find the people through the hashtags and what people are following, and it gives you a chance to really like explore and learn and listen in a really different way than we've ever had access to before. And so I think that's such a good example that you're sharing around, you might have some idea, or there's some public narrative around your customer group. Like I also play pickleball. I love pickleball, and I don't watch the pros at all. And so you're like thinking about the persona that's doing it because it's, flashy, versus their friends are into it, versus it's something really active in their community. All those are just like the behavioral things that impact and help you decide what to do as a company. Awesome. Thank you, Chris. All right. Well, I would like to now jump into the third part of this, which is how to level up our personas. So let's say we have them, we're using them, but how do we make sure that we've got the right stuff captured about our target customer? Where do we get that information, and how often should we think about updating it or refreshing it? So I wanted to come back to another one of these. We've got hey, we have all these facts, right? I like to watch this show, I have a dog and all this stuff. Oh, but we're a software company. So all of this should be grounded. We can do all kinds of data collects, but we want to collect the right data that connects back to your customer and how they would interact with your business. So a lot of information and personas, we can build really rich survey questions to understand all kinds of aspects, but we want to be focused. So let's make sure we anchor everything we're trying to learn about our customers into how it can impact what we do. So there's 3 kinds of personas. A proto persona is created without any new research. We've been in business 25 years. We know all about how people use XYZ. So we're going to just create it based on what we in our minds have aggregated together and kind of grouped together in these different ways. This is probably the most commonly used, but it may not be the most actionable or validated. The middle category is a qualitative persona, and these are the personas that tend to be the most valuable for most companies. In particular, if your company is in a growth stage and you're trying to learn as your customers change over time, these can be more easily updated. So qualitative personas are built on interviews with your customers. Typically, you want somewhere between 5 and 30 total interviews. And you go really deep and understand what's a day in the life look like, what do they care about, what are their pain points. Again, all those questions anchor back to the space you're in, but you start to build an understanding of the real people using your product or the real people that could start using your product. A level above that is to do statistical personas. So this would take a statistically significant, very large survey to understand all the customers you have, cluster them together, and then do that qualitative research. This is something that, in my days at Google, we definitely did a lot of, but in my days working with startups, I would never recommend. So you'll find that there's the right balance for you depending on the maturity of your company and what you're going to be doing with the personas over time. Any questions about what these are all about and how to get started with that? So I love to give examples of tools to use, because I can say all these things at you about go get feedback, but where do you actually get these pieces of feedback, in particular if you don't have that user base yet? So the tool on the left here, HubSpot.com, has a Make My Persona, and it's just going to guide you through the process of starting to think about different criteria and different aspects of the persona and starting to capture and visualize that for yourself and for your team. On the right are two tools that are very reasonable in cost to help you find your target audience. So if you know generally what kind of pain points or maybe what attributes or job titles people have, but you're not sure how to get to that audience for these interviews, you can find people using screeners on respondent user interviews, a bunch of other platforms as well. These are great ones that are intended to set up and make it easy to schedule interviews. Anybody else using any other tools for research right now or for developing their personas? All right. So because this is an e-comm space, I didn't want to leave it just so open-ended to think about your customer personas. I wanted to start thinking and giving some inspiration of specific archetypes that may be relevant or not to your business. At the end of the day, we want our personas to be based on the behaviors and the needs of the customers. So some archetypes to consider is your customer a value hunter? Are they going to be looking for, what value am I going to get from this product? What's the sale? Am I getting free shipping or free returns? The sort of the discount factor is important to this person. So if value hunter is an important segment, you're going to be talking about and maybe creating urgency for them in your site experience and your marketing efforts. The researcher may be somebody who needs to get all the details. How is this going to work? What does it work with other people? I need to know where it works, where it doesn't work. I need all the details. And so balancing what a researcher needs versus a value hunter, the more of these you have, the harder your job is to organize and prioritize. You have people that are brand devotees. How do you build programs where they can, shine in their dedication to what you do and what you're putting out there in the world, and make them feel rewarded and incentivized to keep that level of dedication to what you're providing them. We've got people who are social butterflies who are going to tell your story because they love to talk and they love to share what they're up to and what they're loving. So what kinds of things you would need to prepare for them or to provide for them is going to be very different than the researcher. The replenisher, maybe somebody who wants to set it and forget it. So subscription programs are often a solution if this is an audience type you have. I just want a product that works. I don't want to have to think about it anymore. Just have it show up on my door and then I will use it forever. Click and go is a nice opposition to that. I just want to do it right now. Oftentimes this person's on the mobile phone, they don't want to take 7 steps to get to purchasing. If you have a click and go audience, your design is going to be very different than the researcher, because the researcher isn't going to be click it once, buy it right now. So knowing which archetypes your personas fall under is going to really impact the customer journey you design for them on your site, in your email campaigns across the board. And then lastly, the gifter often gets left behind when we think about our personas. If you have a product that can be gifted, you want to think about what that person needs relative to the person that receives the gift. So things such as, what's the gifter experience like? Do you support gift wrapping, custom messages? Can you reassure them that the information about pricing and their personal information won't be included in the delivery receipt? So if you think about any individual persona or archetype, you can have a whole series of workflows to evaluate in terms of how you message and connect with your persona.
AJ, quick question on this. These are all what I'll say kind of positive and kind of behavior driven ones. I know these probably aren't every single one, but do you find that there are like, I don't know, negative personas? I'm just thinking of the people that like nothing's ever, good enough no matter what you give them, things like that. Something around like, I don't know, the negativity or a gap type. That's a customer.
That's a great call out. There is actually a concept of having a negative persona, meaning you don't want to message or connect to this person. So it's different than what you're suggesting, because there's like some personas who are going to maybe have a little bit more friction in working with them, but they still are your target audience. So maybe if you have designed your site for a click and go person, but most of your audience is a researcher, then there might be attributes about the researcher who's like, my pain points are, I just can't get the information I want. I just want to get on the phone with everyone. I want to have, there's like all these needs that could be there that may be negative in relation to the current experience. Mm-hmm. The other persona that is less often created, but can be very valuable is like, this is who we're not targeting. We don't ever care to fit or to sell to this type of person. And that can be really helpful because it just, again, it's the opposite of prioritization. It's like, what can we throw out? What do we not have to address? Yes, we're going to get some messages from these people saying this is a pain point, or can't you just offer me this discount or what have you? But if you've decided as a company that that's not where we focus, then you can kind of move on and let those, detractors be on their own.
Yeah,
does that answer your question?
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think you did a great job giving me an understanding from two different perspectives. So great.
And I think for any given persona, these, like the way these are described here, might give you an initial impression of the positive side, but everyone is going to have pain points or frictions or concerns with your brand or your product. And so they'll just be different. Right? They'll just be different levels of that information. And so you do want to capture not just the sunny, here's the positive, they're going to amplify our message on social for no cost, no problem, because that person will also have different needs or pain points currently. So with any of these, there's like lots of different aspects you could capture.
Yeah, and that's a good call out too, for sure. Are these all the ones that exist in the world, or are these just like a sample
No,
set?
I'm sure there are so many more than this. This is really just more from
but
a good starting place from
awesome.
Thinking about your e-com brand. Mm-hmm.
Certainly.
And in fact, you could probably start with one of these and pair this with some of that qualitative data, and you'll emerge with your own kind of archetype, or maybe it's two of these together or something like that. All right, so a couple common mistakes. One thing is just like creating a persona solely based on stereotypes, like, just off the cuff. This is what this group of people care about and what matters to them. We want to anchor it in real data, and we don't want to just operate on stereotypes in particular, because stereotypes can get outdated. So we want to really understand people and their behaviors and their needs and wants, as opposed to like what Austinites need, right? It's like we're all more than our stereotype. It's really common for personas to go stale. So anytime you're looking at them, just kind of keep in mind, like how long have we been operating on the assumptions in this persona? Is there anything in this capture of who our target audience is that may be impacted by the greater world at large? I will say, we're 2 years into COVID now, but for COVID, a lot of personas really were upended. If you were selling B2B, you suddenly weren't selling to a group of people in an office, you were selling to people working virtually at home. And so their needs, their desires, their challenges are different than what they were before. So anytime there's a substantial disruption to your market or to the world and community at large, you want to definitely take a deeper look to make sure you haven't missed some of the changes. We had the kind of comic at the beginning to point to this one about just like we build them, great work, now they're put away. So definitely we want to make sure we're using these. If we're going to go through that effort of the research, we want to make sure we're calling on it early and often. We don't want to just make assumptions. We can start with assumptions and we should just keep testing those out, because it may very well be that, maybe the gifter persona, maybe she doesn't really care about certain things and she does care about other things, and our assumptions just weren't quite right about what she valued in that. So, asking those questions, having those interviews and conversations. Having too many personas can be really hard to prioritize. So when you have more than, it's a good exercise to have a prioritization within your personas, because if they have conflicts with each other, you're going to need to prioritize which person gets that better experience or gets that message targeted to them. So you want to make sure as you generate more of them, that you have a relative sense of like when each of these personas are relatively more important. It could be different initiatives over time. This quarter, we're focusing on optimizing the experience for the gifter. Next quarter, we're focusing on the click and go person. But what can happen is if you have too many, then the conversation can get kind of mucky because you're not sure who is going to ultimately help prioritize. And then interviewing the wrong people, not enough people. This is kind of a general research problem that we all have for any kind of user research we do, is that we've got to have the right number of inputs and be talking to people that truly would be our target audience or truly are our core customers. And that's where that more sophisticated, like statistical model approach to this can help you really validate that. But you can definitely start to understand kind of clusters of who are our customers, what attributes are similar among them. So my final word on this today is make sure you know your customer and write it down, so that you can prioritize your time and your spend with the goal in mind of driving more conversion and generating results for your company. And I believe that's my last slide. So if you need some help figuring this all out, feel free to shoot me a note here. We can stay on for a few more minutes and chat about it. I have a contact form on our site as well, so happy to take any questions there. Anybody have any follow-up questions or thoughts from today?
I've got a question, AJ, about the whole research side of things. Let's see, I'll actually turn on my video here. I went running, so on the research side, there's the proto, which I think what we operate under, which is we're guessing from our interactions with them. And then the next level was doing the interviews, but instead of interviews, isn't a good source of data almost, we know what platform they're coming from, all that whole Google search console stuff, right? Isn't that?
Yeah, that's kind of in between.
More valuable?
It's kind of in between, because your persona is the story of that. So that the facts of they come from this place, the fact of their age and their demographics, those are all kind of facts about your audience, which can be useful for segmentation. But when you think about persona, they're a lot more than just where they came from, what their age is. It's a lot more narrative. So like, what does a day in the life look like? What are their pain points? What's frustrating for them about your product, about their world, about being a pet owner? And so it's starting to have more of that kind of qualitative storytelling aspect to it that the hard data is not going to give you on its own. But it's a great starting place. So if you haven't looked at that data, you should definitely know what facts you do know about that audience and like start it there. And that may be a good pointer of like, okay, well, we want people, maybe you get a lot of people coming in from Facebook. So maybe in your screening process for interviews, you'd say, we want people who look and buy products through Facebook. And that might be part of how you narrow in to that audience.
Okay. And I like the idea of negative personas, because we've had some customers that are just horrible. And it's like, I'd rather not ever have this person ever on my website if I had the choice, because they've caused us so much pain.
Mm-hmm. But I can imagine for you also, as well, it could be, you guys don't sell cat products, right?
No cats, not yet.
Yeah. So like a negative persona is someone who has pets other than a dog, right? You just probably don't ever need to communicate or build content for that group.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But the key, I guess the key one on your archetypes is the replenishment, right? It's a subscription. That's the customer that keeps giving. So those are the ones we definitely want.
Yeah. And to just kind of anchor back to like how you might find that group of people who are doing subscription, you might think about what other products do they do subscription for their dogs, and then find people who have subscriptions for their pets and interview them as it relates to dog chews, right? So that might be a way to kind of build up that understanding.
Yeah, I'm tracking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are they the same type of people that'll click the Amazon Tide Pods every week sort of thing or not? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Or do they have, maybe there's some like assumptions, or you could start by saying, we want to look at all chewy.com subscribers who get all their pet medicine by subscription, right? Maybe there's an overlap there.
Yes.
So that kind of comes back to like the partnership, what other common ground do you have in finding that audience?
Okay, thanks.
AJ, kind of along that, like, is that typically kind of like just a survey to say, hey, like, do you also, do these things based on guesses or based on some user interviews, and you're trying to, confirm that for maybe statistical significance, or at least, just trying to get more feedback? Or does that tend to be a open comment type of form? Are they doing multiple choice, or are they doing free form response of where else they shop or something like that?
Yeah, my answer is going to be, it depends.
Okay.
The way you would structure the survey would be based on like what your current assumptions are and how much information you have. So something we might do if you were working, like when I work with some newer companies that haven't really thought or haven't had enough experience to test out some of the assumptions, they'll start with open-ended for the first 50 or so responses, and then we'll structure multiple choice questions based on the initial responses. So it can be iterative. It could be based on what you assume about your customers, what you've heard about them. In that proto persona phase, you do know things about your customers. You are becoming experts in them, but we want to make sure that we then like dig a little deeper in those interviews to base the personas on. So you can build assumptions from that proto persona and then test out those assumptions. And like, as you learn more, you can start testing out those other things that are emerging.
Sure. And can you also remind me, for kind of a statistical type persona, what sort of size of company or maybe number of customers does that kind of get more?
Where it becomes more valuable?
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. I would say, it becomes a point where where you want to start prioritizing between the kinds of feedback you get. So if you're getting so much feedback from customers or through customer service or on your site generally, and you need to start kind of sorting through them to say, who should we listen to or prioritize, we'll say more carefully. That's where I feel like if you have so much input coming at you, you have to then prioritize by saying, but is this part of a big enough cluster for us to respond to the results that we're seeing or the information? So if we can start to say, less than 1% of our customers have an issue with the fact that our trial period is 30 days. Should we change our trial period for the 1% of people currently willing to sign up? Probably not. And so it's in the early days, we're just trying to like pull together information, learn about the customer and go deeper with it. But as more personas emerge, we want to make sure we're focused on and prioritizing the right one, which is where the statistical approach will be helpful.
Sure. And is that by definition using statistical significant type path?
Yeah, all of the three definitions, there's like sort of a path between them. So yes, sure. And in the perfect world, we'd really know, we would use some cluster analysis to truly understand our customers. Maybe along the way, we've developed personas, we're starting to do surveys, but we're just getting a few hundred responses. It doesn't mean we should throw out what we're learning there. So the more input we can have to it and validation, that's better, strengthen what the signal is that we're getting with more significance. But qualitative data can be really impactful and informative and won't be statistically significant. So we just want to collect lots of data sources.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely makes sense. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. What else is on everyone's mind? Persona, target audience. research, anything else? Feel free to drop any other questions. For next month, we're going to be doing a preview of some user research tools that are particularly useful for virtual online e-comm companies. So we'll be having a couple of different companies come share what they are putting out there, how to use it, how to sign up, and maybe facilitating a discussion about like what kinds of research would be done with each of those tools. So it'll be a nice follow on to this. So we look forward to seeing many of you next month. Thanks for being on today. Oh, you have another question? Yeah, I'll stand.
Do we have access to the PowerPoint? Is it on the Meetup link or?
Oh, good question. I'm happy to send it to you. If you want to send me an email as a follow-up, I'm happy to share it directly with you. I'll drop my email in the chat for you. And then we also do post this recording on YouTube. So you'll be able to like rewatch the whole discussion if you want that context.
Awesome. Thank you so much, AJ. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for being on. Nice to meet a lot of you. Didn't see many of you today. Did you have another question?
Oh, well, I just wanted to share a little bit about, I was on earlier separately and then I like moved locations and, but just wanted to share a little bit about our context. It's a pretty unique one. We're at a nonprofit and we have a market space that's kind of half convenience, half gift shop. And so we get people, you know, like half of our, or probably most of our customer base are people who are formerly homeless coming in. They have, you know, like we're in this community and have, yeah, they're no longer homeless, but like the biggest things that they buy are like cigarettes. A lot of them are cranky, you know, they usually want sugar, and things like that. And then we also have some customers who come in who are visiting the village and want to look at the art and the jewelry that have been made by our neighbors living out here. And, you know, you talked about having, like, if you have too many personas, like you can start getting conflicts. We have two, even if we have two personas.
Yeah, you're right.
Like,
they're very different.
Yeah, very, very different personas and needs being totally opposite. And so, but I think this is helpful and like interesting. It makes like intrigues me of like, ooh, like I wonder how that like looking through the persona lens, how that impacts how we arrange this space, how we you know, just the things that we choose to sell, or I don't know, just it's intriguing. Thank you.
Yeah. We also have an online store that we sell our goods and products on as well. And so they're two different entities, but they like kind of have similar, I mean, different audiences, I would say, probably or personas, but anyway.
Yeah, and a useful exercise once you've defined the personas is to kind of think about that journey or path that they would be on and like what sort of touch points they might have or what they're looking for along the way, because you might find those paths like overlap a lot. And so you have to serve both audiences in both places, or there's maybe sort of two different experiences that could be true for the physical location or online. So by starting to like not just define who, but also like what they're doing and what that relationship looks like with the company or with the nonprofit, that will help you get some clarity over, are these really at odds with each other, or do we just need to give them a little bit different experiences depending on where they are?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank
So
you.
appreciative of you sharing all this.
Great. Well, thanks for being on. Appreciate your questions. Anyone else have anything else before we wrap up? Otherwise, everyone can have 2 minutes back on their Thursday.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. This will be posted to YouTube, and we look forward to seeing you guys in our next meetup. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.